If the exile has come here, then he has not come alone.
Of course, apprentice. The huntress is with the exile. She has a special It also makes her difficult for me to sense, but not to
Shall I?
No, I have brought a beast to if she survives.
Well, here's a surprise. Why can't we ever go to Alderaan or Ithor or so?
If you are watching this, and what the General suspected was true, the Sith are striking the graveyard of Malachor 5. The ship the Sith Lord was on, if you reach Malachor's surface, the mass shadow generator can be undone. Use the sequence I am unlocking in your memory banks on the engine core. If my calculations are correct, 4 vessels should be enough. Once the sequence has begun, it cannot be stopped. So, I know your weapon systems are minimal, and I don't know what awaits you in Malachor. Follow you. I've done all I asked.
Touching the probability of the Iridonian, of course, the probability that I would do the same is equally high. You realize I cannot permit you or the exile. And since you have no offensive weapon, you must understand that the General would not wish the relics or the Sith's strength here. Without them, the galaxy would be reduced to anarchy within years. So, let us wait here.
When the exile enters Treya's academy, he will be faced with a choice. Show him every respect when he arrives in these halls, Lord Scion. This I command you.
the Jedi before you. This planet is a graveyard for your kind. She thinks you should be spared, but only so. Why she would bother with one? It is ancient, a relic that survived the destruction of Malachor. It was always hate. It draws death and hate to it, channels it. It has been here for thousands of years. It is a place where this Kreia says it was a place of reflection for the ancient Sith, a gateway to their land. She said that the teachings here will lead one to the Sith, the true Sith, and all their shadowed worlds. It does not matter. The Lord Revan had the... Like you, Revan touched power and turned away. I was there when the... Then it shall be proof that you're not... You're wrong. She respects power. I am ready for you, exile. Only one may serve my master. Now you realize the truth. As long as the dark places of this world. You're strong, but you can't. There is no life without the Force. The Force is a blade. She sought you out because she would not. You are the one. You will not. I still have the power to stop you. I can die 100. I will not fall. Why? It is not possible to walk. The Force is who I am. The dark side. It was not. No matter how many I kill, Kreia, her weakness, I am glad.
At last you have arrived. Is Malachor as you remember? You no doubt have many questions. I never destroyed Atris. She had destroyed herself. And like Malachor, she was part of your past. It was part of your training. And there must always be a Darth. She loved you, you know, as one loves a champion. Yes, it is all that is left. More talk of machines and threats. If you would, and of course you must be willing to die, to kill us all. You may hold Malachor in your grasp. Would you destroy us both before learning them? If so, then do it, for you. It is said that the Force has... I wield it, but it uses us all because I hate the Force. I hate that it seems to have a will, that it would control us to achieve some measure of balance. But in you, I see you are beautiful. I use it as I would use a poison, but perhaps these are the excuses of an old woman. Yes, always. From the moment you awoke, I have used you. I have used you so that you might become strong, stronger than I. And I used you to make those who wounded me reveal themselves, so they could be killed by the Republic. I used you to keep the Lords of the Sith from condemning. I used you to lure them to Telos, where they could be at last fought and killed. I used you to reveal Atris's corruption. I used you to gather the Jedi and I used you to make those who wounded me reveal themselves. Perhaps you were expecting some surprise, for me to reveal a secret. There is no great revelation. No, there were not. In times past and in times future, there are Jedi who will stop listening to the Force, those that will try to forget it, but maintain unconscious and those, as in the past, just as I, but no Jedi ever made the choice you did, to sever ties so completely, so utterly, that it leaves a wound in the Force. It was a mistake to try to make you feel it again, I see that now. But there is truth in you. The apprentice must kill the master. If you do not, I will kill you. If I do not, then all you have achieved will be as nothing, as empty. Then finish this. Kill me. You will not show me mercy. I will see you break before you do. At last, it is done. You are greater than any I have ever trained. Save me. You already have. It is enough what you have done, from now into the future. Many things do I see as I gaze here from the heart. If it matters to you at this last moment, it is my last gift. You travel with them for so long, yet you do not know them still. Feel them through the Force. They were the lost Jedi, you know, the true Jedi upon which the... She will stop hunting life and instead live it. She was not born. She will miss you and think of you often. Her death will occur in many years' time on a forgotten planet, saving the lives of others. But it will be her choice, and she will have no regret. Many battles does that one have left in him, as Revan intended. And Canderous is a loyal beast, no matter how much he is. They will die a death that will last millennia, until all that remains is their code, their history. The blinded one shall return to her home world, and she shall look upon the surface of her life has been changed by your meeting in ways. Salvation is... If she leaves this place, she will leave battle behind her, in no small part due to your influence. She will take Atris's role as historian and teach. Atten is, as always, the fool, and the Force watches out for one such as him. I would have killed the galaxy to preserve you. I would have let the galaxy... You are not a Jedi. Their paths are even the small one who waits for you outside this place I sense it has one last journey for you. You must go where Revan did, into the unknown regions, where the Sith... It is because he remembered what lay buried here, this place, its teaching, and because Malachor, like Korriban, is on the fringes of the ancient Sith Empire, where the Sith wait for us in the... Have we? You thought that the corrupted remnants of the Republic... You are wrong. The Sith is... And Revan knew that the true war is not against the Republic. It waits for us, and he left the Ebon Hawk and all its machines behind, and like you, he knew he must leave all loves behind as well. Because such attachments are not the way of... It would have helped had he made her understand, but she was always... Because I did not know where he had gone, but he will need warriors. Perhaps you shall go there. Instead, The Republic will fall under the care of the herds of Ithor. The surface of Telos will bloom again, and complacent and peaceful it shall forget the time that Saul Karath orbit, but it shall be a home world again. Dantooine shall survive. The community you saved shall be the foundation of... The Republic shall again establish their presence there, and shield it with its... Nar Shaddaa shall persist as where once the lost and disposed were trapped. Queen Talia shall have a long... Onderon shall remain in the Republic, and the world... Korriban shall be as it always was. It, like Malachor, brushes the edges of the Empire that waits in the dark, and like Malachor, the Sith have forgotten it. For a time, they will... You feel them, they...